Hello, everyone. I'm back with the Pregnant Hag podcast. This is going to be the January 2022 edition. I have a very special guest for you today. It is Prune Harris. And Prune, rather than me reading out a bio, would you yourself tell us what it is you do, what you love doing in life?
Absolutely. Thanks, Imelda, for inviting me onto this Pregnant Hag podcast. It's a real joy and delight. And for me, well, I think I've been working on what is the single thread that I really feel called to work with. I've been able to see energy since I was born, and so the making the invisible visible is something that really calls to me, whether that's the human energy system, whether that's the energy of consciousness and interconnectedness between people, whether it's the energy that we would understand and work within the spirit world. So that, I think that's a really big part, and not only to make it visible, but to inspire the remembering of the individual soul, so that the world soul can be activated, enlivened, empowered, brought forward more. So that, in a nutshell, is what I'm working with.
Yeah, and please also give us the name of your school, your company, so if people want to look you up. I'll put it in the show notes as well, but just give it a mention.
Brilliant, thanks. So at pruneharris.com, you can find, I do a lot of online teaching, and I can't wait to be in more in-person teaching. I don't know about you, Imelda, but my goodness, I've missed that interaction, that live transmission that happens with students in person, that actually happens to a lesser extent online, doesn't it?
Well, it's just different. I mean, I'm very grateful for the online thing, because it means that we've been able to keep going and to connect with people, you know, during these very difficult times, but also times where the world is rebirthing itself. It's a very special time. So to still be connected to, you know, students and people I work with has been wonderful. And I've even found, you know, you can do ceremonies online, you can do many things online if you are creative. But it's not the same, and especially also once the Zoom screen goes down, you're there all alone by your computer. Well, after the real ceremony, you'd sit, at least in my house, on the floor, you make that pot of tea, you have some conversations, and you sort of debrief together. And that, I think, is much harder when you do things on Zoom.
Yeah, I really hear that compassionate connection that really grounds those ceremonial experiences deeper in the body. And often I think of the times we've sat together after having ceremony in your house, and then I would go back and go to my bed, and you still feel like the ceremony is moving around you, but also community is moving around you because of sharing that cup of tea or that chocolate. And yeah, so powerful.
Yeah, it's like you stay in the dream incubation cocoon. And even though people don't stay in my house, like people leave to go to the B&B up the road or whatever, but I always feel that the time after ceremony weaves the cocoon, and then everyone stays in the dream incubation cocoon together. And then when people show up the next morning for more work, it's like we've been away from each other, but we've still all been in the same place, and we've met in the other world before we continue. And you can facilitate that on Zoom, but you have to get really creative to do it. It is possible, you know, it is possible, but it's a completely different way of working.
Yeah, it really is. And of course, it enables us to reach even more people and connect with people that can't travel to us as well. So in that respect, amazing.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because in my life, I always had I had a lot of students across the Atlantic in the United States. I had the students in Europe, and even a few in places like Australia or whatever, or South America. Even one rheumatology student in Antarctica, research station. Which is funny. And for years, I would encourage people to get in touch. I tell the people in the US or the people in Europe we're doing, say, oh, you may want to look at the Facebook profile of so-and-so. And people would say, yes, and I'll do it. But now they've been in classes together, there's this lively collaboration where people have formed friendships across the Atlantic. And they're like doing their own groups where they meet and they do stuff where I don't even need to be present. So there's this lively collaboration going across the Atlantic Ocean. And I don't see that that would have happened before the pandemic. So that's the real gift of this new way of working.
Yeah, absolutely. Really agree.
don't knock it, but yeah, I do miss working this, even sitting with people in person, you know, that cup of tea, or there's just something about physically all being in the same place, or like when we're all in Sweden together, being on that beautiful land, and like being on the land and coming back and sharing the stories. That's not quite the same as Zoom. So, but Prune, today, we've already touched upon it really. It's the pandemic has already come into the conversation. But you and I got talking a few weeks ago, and you mentioned to me that you've done some very interesting work with the runes while you've actually been ill with COVID. And of course, as a room magician teacher, my ears perk up, because I think that's a topic that's so relevant for our times and something I think more people would like to hear about. So would you mind telling us something about that? What happened there and how you were working with the runes, please?
Yeah, so I work with the runes every day in part of my ceremony once I'm up and about, and I work with runes very until recently. I worked with them as individual beings, individual forms, or connected forms to kind of inspire or call upon a greater form, a greater energy, a movement in some place. I think I'll just leave it at that. And then I got COVID and actually got it very seriously. I was in hospital with it, and it was a few days before I went into hospital. I began getting symptoms on a Friday. By the Tuesday, I really was no longer being housed physically, particularly. I'd had a temperature of over 40 degrees from that Sunday, and actually that lasted for over 10 days. So I mean, at that point, your body really struggling. Yeah, so I was definitely no longer being housed in the physical, and by the time I got into the hospital, I was very, very physically compromised. I never had to be intubated. The oxygen that I received in the hospital was enough to help solidify that life force back. And I was in hospital for nearly 2 weeks. So, you know, an amazing initiatory and transformative time. But when I, for the first many days, being out, you know, I think, so this is language I can only have because I've come back from that experience. Yeah, I couldn't have really used these same words going into it, but it felt like that incredible oneness. We talk about the void, don't we? But this was, for me, it was that place of immensity rather than void. It was so packed with sentience, with potentiality. I think that's the beautiful word. So being in that place of oneness, then of course I couldn't really identify individuality within it as well. So it was only when I came back that I was then able to begin in some ways to make sense. I was also very, very physically compromised at that point, hardly any cognitional energy or ability. So it's more the sort of building of a living experience and understanding it as we moved. But once I came back into my body more, then I began to notice that around my bed in the hospital was the rune circle. And the rune circle was actually, imagine you had a wand that kind of dripped gold or something like that, and you drew the runes with that wand. So they were hovering around in a circle. And at any point they could spin into a sphere, but they tended not to. And if I looked at them, so imagine I'm in the hospital bed, lots of beepings going off, people around me, you know, in terrible places of coughing, struggling to breathe, the urgency of the amazing nurses and the calm of the amazing nurses. So in a place of chaos, really, in a place of chaos. And these runes would just be kind of jiggling around. And I learned to watch them and see which one or two came forward, and they would either rise up out of the circle or would come towards me. And as soon as that happened, I could then it's about being in active relationship at that point, isn't it? You know, there was the understanding that this one was the one that was coming forward, was the energy that I needed to be in relationship at that time. And so then I would start. At first I couldn't speak, so I couldn't actually work with the sound of the rune, but I would be working with the sound internally. It felt like my heart was speaking it, or my cells were speaking it. And then it would be a case of either helping see that rune into certain parts of my body, so maybe my lungs or my heart or wherever it really felt it needed to go, and then watching that rune actually absorb down into that organ or into that body, or sometime into the tiniest point. The wrists were very, very active. So maybe that rune shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and then just came and then sucked into the body. Sometimes it was like the runes were dripping out of my wrists or around my throat. And the other way that they also worked was to, well, you mentioned that cocoon state. I love that, because that's exactly what's happened. That rune would come into the body, and as it met my skin, the entire fabric of the skin, I mean, if we examine our skin, it's like an amazing interconnected lattice, isn't it? And that fabric of the skin would enliven with the rune, and there would be this kind of cocoon of rune around the body system.
That's a phrase right there, the cocoon of rune. I think you have just coined a whole new term. Wonderful.
Yeah, really, really powerful. And it was a way, there were certain runes that showed up more than others. I work with the Northumbrian runes, and actually the Gar rune was very prominent, and it felt, in so many ways, I felt like I was suspended in that place on the spear. But I mean, just the gift of the entire cosmic force, the entire cosmic energy being housed in that circle, and then like a little slice of pie, that was the force that I needed to be in closer relationship with, or that had the capacity to call my body into more being at that point.
So the runes as medicine, because Scar is like said to be the rune of Odin's spear. And also, just for the audience, because I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with what the runes are, so let's just explain very quickly that perhaps most people start with or work with the runes of the Elder Futhark, and that gives us 24 runes. But there are actually many rune rows, and also like language or like people, the runes evolve over time. So the rune row Prune is referring to is the Anglo-Saxon Futhark. And that gives us 9 additional runes compared to the Elder Futhark. Though actually in between is the Younger Futhark, which is only 16 runes. So that's another thing most people don't realize, the real fluctuations. The Elder Futhark, 24 runes, the Younger Futhark, 16. And then like the Northumbrian or Anglo-Saxon Futhark, which is very closely related to the Frisian Futhark, it goes up to 33 runes. And also some of these runes are contested, because not all of them appear many times in all tests. So like the real rune scholars still have debates about whether all of these runes are included or not. But I think as rune magicians, we can work with that on our own level. And, you know, that's, I think, where the scholars and the rune magicians part ways. Because I'm very clearly hearing that some of these, so to speak, additional runes were real allies for you while you were in hospital.
Yeah, they really were. The oak rune.
Yeah.
As I began to get physically stronger, that one would present and would often come straight into my my belly system, which of course in many traditions we understand that to be a real root of power in the body, whether it's a dantian or the hara line, and would come in, and the trunk would grow through me, grounding me down into the earth. So that was I hadn't really formed a big relationship before that time with that rune, but it felt like in lots of ways it carried an earth god energy. It was an amazing place of being held by the ancient forests, by that sacred green man energy. There was a lightness and an immense power and strength in that one. So it felt I could kind of breathe up into the boughs more, but wow, the roots are really strong. So they became amazing allies. The other one was Queerth, the funerary rune, because I think there was an incredible amount in my body system that was being transmuted and offered up through the process of illness. I mean, illness, illness's transformation is an amazing road, isn't it? Not one that we actively choose, but my goodness, when it comes.
Of course, to make that comment, yes.
Yeah, but when it comes, if we can walk with that journey towards health, I never feel, you said rune as medicine, you know, illness as medicine as well.
Oh yeah, that is the alchemy of illness, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it felt like, wow, I mean, that stage, recognizing the being in hospital and recognizing what an incredible privilege of birth I have here. The fact that I am able to access a hospital, the fact that I'm able to access the oxygen without which I wouldn't be alive. I mean, a pretty stark place to be in. And yeah, one of immense gratitude and joy of life as well.
Yeah, well, no, I absolutely believe that. I'm also sort of wondering, like, the way the runes can forge for you. And of course, there are runes that are related to what we call the wild hunt in the Northern tradition, which is the Old Norse way, or the Old Germanic way as well, of performing psychic bond work. And I'm very thankful that you came back and you're still with us. But for me, it also kind of raises the question of, would the runes also be with the people who actually died and accompany them into the other world? There is, of course, a rune, which is rune A, or A was the horse rune, which is the psychic rune. But just wondering if it's okay to ask if you saw any glimpses of those possibilities or those doorways.
Yeah, I think that's a really, it's funny, just this morning, A was really strong. It was like walking with me as I walked to the shower. Now, you know, Imelda, that I have horses in my life, and I feel like my biggest teachers when I was young, when I spent hours and hours on my own with the horses, you know, really, they walked me between worlds continually. I owe them a lot for my life paths in lots of ways. There was a few things I was aware of when I was in that place of immensity. One was the amount of light in it, and it was that dark light. It was the immense dark light within the dark, from which the light that we access can come from, and that there were other lights there. At one point, I remember very clearly moving along a pathway, and not as a human form. I was light myself, and moving along the pathway and recognizing another light form beside me. And maybe 10 days before I started having COVID, maybe not quite that long, I'd been with a very close friend and helped her die. And as I was moving through this path, I believe the path of the dead, as I was moving along this path, I recognized this light. And I thought, my goodness, like that light form there is Denny, is the friend who died. And at that time, that was perfectly in the place of consciousness I was in then. That was totally normal, totally fine. That was Denny. We were moving along that pathway of the dead, the pathway of the souls. And I don't know how time, of course, time doesn't work in the same way. But it was soon after that point, and I don't know whether that's 3 days or 3 hours, but it was soon after that point when I felt myself hurtling back towards earth. I mean, like I don't know what, you know, like falling without a parachute. That's what it felt like, hurtling down. And I was really aware of my form at that point. I was no longer this light moving along this pathway of souls. And I looked to the left, and there was a man also hurtling towards earth, but he was in control of his movement. And beside him was a horse, and beside him was a bird, an eagle, a falcon, and all of them had hats on. And that's just you know, how when we work with spirit awarenesses, there's little things that kind of cut through the human awareness, doesn't it? And I'm like, these people have hats on. And I spoke to the man as we were falling. He said to me, "You're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place." And I said, "Well, like, who are you?" And all the time I'm hurtling. I can see my body in the hospital room, and I'm hurtling towards it. And he in conversation with him, and actually a little bit then, but then again the next day, he said he was a Tuvan shaman who was a skywalker, and that he spent his time out in those realms of immensity, and he had seen me as a human in the wrong place, walking on the pathway of souls. And so he was writing the balance. He was returning energy out of place into energy in place. And even as I say that now, I feel all of those goosebumps, like the humility that there is a living being somewhere who perceived an energetic imbalance and corrected it. And that act returned me to my body, to my life, to my family. You know, I was going to say the word debt, but that's not appropriate word, but the exchange of energy, the consciousness that actually, I know I've worked like that. Imelda, I'm sure you've worked like that for energies, for souls, for people either in the living or non-living. There will never be, oh, thank you very much for doing that. There'll never be that level of human interaction. And yet on the sacred level, the exchange, the power, the depth, the compassion, you know, it leaves me speechless when I recognize that is an active part of our world.
And of our work as well.
Yeah.
And I certainly remember, you know, when we do psychic work, be it like on the wild hunt, or there's other ways of doing it I've been trained in as well. But I certainly also remember, like, as you say, entering those like realms between the worlds, or, you know, the realm of immensity, or whatever words. I mean, it's beyond language, very hard to put words on that. But I certainly remember encountering beings or working with people and having to say quite firmly, this is not your time to die. I'm going to take you back to your body. And this, I think, is the first time I've heard it, like, from the receiving end. So it's kind of like the other side of the coin. So, and that is like so interesting. And it's also beautiful to see how there is kind of a large cosmic cauldron. For me, that is Ur or Urus, personal interpretation. But that ultimately we also have to get beyond the idea of reciprocity of, oh, it's always with a person I know and I say thank you. And of course, you know, saying thank you is extremely important, don't get me wrong, but it becomes more a matter of using our unique talents and like the lifespan we are granted on earth, and then putting something in that cauldron so someone else can take something out of that cauldron. It's more being in reciprocity with all that is, like reciprocity on a larger level, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to recognize, I think on one level, I comprehended that very fully. But this is the level of my life. And so it's a different sort of awareness. You know, I think that the whole experience fundamentally changed my vibration, has changed my relationship with everything. I was going to say with the runes, but yes, but with everything. And the runes have been a really important part of that. What do I want to say? There's something about like the magic of sending, what we can send either across distances or within our own energy fields has to come from a level of relational connection on the inside, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so it feels that the capacity for what can flow from me now is far greater than the capacity I had 4 months ago. And that's an incredible place to be in, because then it raises, and you brought that forward beautifully, and it raises that question of action, doesn't it? Action in life, commitment in life. Where are we individually and as teachers, as students, as communities? Where are we willing to expand into? So big questions, and of course the runes are really amazing empowerment and opener. I mean, the portals time after time of being able to push and pull and do everything on the internal landscape that needs doing in order to move into the external, as you very well know.
But also the runes will be there for this journey as well. And I think that's the beauty here. The runes were there with you before this initiation occurred. The runes were absolutely with you in the initiation. Now the initiation, because you've had the privilege of you're still with us, you're going to live, but then also it's almost like you need to give thanks for the initiation. There's a giving back for the initiation, that you're now really asked to bring your talents and your skills and your experience to the world on yet another level. But again, the runes will be there. They will surround you like a circle, and they will be with you.
Yeah, very true.
And I think that also, sorry, yeah.
Just thinking, it's funny, the two people that had absolute knowledge, I believe it was knowledge, not a blind faith. There was a knowledge that I was not going to die with my 2 children. It didn't even cross their mind. They knew that I was coming back, and I feel the gift of the universe, the gift of the runes, the gift of protection in that as well. So I think what I'm saying is that when we work in relationship with those cosmic forces, they extend through all of our networks, don't they?
Yes, I think they do, but I think extend for all realms. And as I said, I don't want to push this too heavily, because this is a story about returning. But I think for the people who do not return, who have a relationship with the runes, I personally observe and absolutely believe that the runes will then also be with them on the road they take into the other world. And that just as you're now guided to do things in this life, that the people who have had to take the other path, because it was their time to do so, depending on how one views fate and illness. But I also believe that just as the runes come forward to work with you or to work with me as well, that they come forward for those people who've taken the other route into those lands of the dead, however people themselves perceive that. But if we're now talking within the Old Norse traditions that the runes are part of, I believe they also meet us after death, and they help us on our journey there. And that's part of their multi-dimensionality.
Yeah.
And when you were speaking, I even get the feeling that a thing that's often on my mind, and I have a draft book about it that I haven't returned to for a while, but it's the concept of evolving gods. Because it's very much my belief that just as we human beings evolve through being in relationship with deities and divine beings, it is my belief that there's reciprocity there, and it works the other way as well. So I believe that the gods and the goddesses, they are evolving through that ongoing relationship with human beings. So the more sort of tricky question I'd like to put, I'm not expecting you to answer it necessarily, is, do you have the feeling that for those indwelling spirits of the runes, that they too, that these indwelling spirits of the runes are also learning and evolving as they come forward to work with us through these times? And yes, there have been many pandemics before. I'm going to talk about that in a webinar our Sweden group is going to do in February. So like a pandemic is not a new thing, but the COVID pandemic is a new thing. So you get the feeling that those divinities or those divine forces themselves are on a journey of like learning and increasing in consciousness through interacting with us for these situations. I don't know if I'm making sense. Am I making
You're making perfect sense, making perfect sense. And I love the question, Imelda. Yes, in a simple answer. It feels, one of the places I've been really exploring is how we create reality through awareness, how we create reality through what we choose to focus on. And I firmly believe there is a world waiting in its becoming, waiting in its emerging, and that we are part of the we are part of helping it emerge. We're the midwives to that emerging. And of course, that is not a definite, that is a potential emerging. There are many forms of potential emerging. So then where we concentrate our energies, our efforts, our challenges, our gifts, our everything, where we choose to pay attention can actually help guide that pathway of becoming. And the runes, the deities, the houses of cosmic collective consciousness, the houses of the way I see it within that circle is that every force in the cosmos, human, non-human, all through all realms, every force is housed by that circle of runes. And therefore, and of course, many of these places overlap, but if we imagine those 33 or 24, however many little sections of pie in that circle, then
like a zodiac, but different.
exactly the same. And actually model after model after model, the medicine wheel, you know, we could put so many different models into that same circular container, into the cauldron, and that those cosmic forces, the way that they are moved through deities and the way that humans can move, I don't want to give it a hierarchical aspect, but move to meet them, then that's always in a form of evolution. Yeah. I can't believe in any part of me that there is stagnancy in that. So whatever, whether we take a rune in the indwelling spirit, whether we take a deity of any pantheon, I can't believe that they are static, boxed in. Our perception of them maybe. Until
but that's human limitation, the limitation of the human mind.
Absolutely, and the familiarity of certainty. That place of feeling like, oh, I know what that god or that goddess, or as a really, really simple example here, one of the runes that is really just, wow, delicious to me is the Tia rune. And, you know, for me, that rune, when I work with it, when it comes forward in that very, very masculine way of the god Tia. But it also comes forward as the huntress Artemis with her bow. And there's a logical part of me like, well, Prune, can you really merge Artemis, Diana, and Tia? What a crazy concept. But actually, they both have that concept of the arrow moving through them. And why not have a rune that evolves into this amazing huntress, warrior, fierce protector? You know, why not listen to the way that these runes evolve in relationship to us as well? So yeah, I totally agree with you and feel like, yes, there is evolution from all parts within that. And that's exciting as well. That really gives me,
And I think from a point of cultural astronomy, I'm about to start teaching a course in cultural astronomy. You know, both Artemis and Tyr are very much hooked into the star door of the northern sky, like the circumpolar sky. So you only need to go up to the night sky to see that what you're saying there. It's not actually so far-fetched. It's quite easy to link that together. And I just love that and love working with those correspondences.
Yeah. And it feels, we are in the edge of helping a new world, a new level of consciousness come into being. So we have to be prepared to kind of examine those boxed in paradigms, don't we? But my goodness, that's not easy, because
that is not easy. Not everyone is prone to self-reflection either. That's why, as a teacher, I would have a hammer on self-reflection and on shadow work. Because like, if we're not aware of what the content of our own experience and mind is, we're going to just perpetuate it. So talking about what you said a moment ago, that there is not just like one world being born. Now, think of the work, if you think of our presence on earth as spiritual midwifery, there is not just one world being born. There are like different options, different potentials for what we could manifest. And of course, we're both like mothers. So for our children and for our children's children, and here I also mean the children of the world, not only our personal children, you know, we want to manifest that option that's going to be the most honoring of both human beings in the earth. But also that is the thing that is not always certain yet, with all the other unresolved material that plays out. And I feel that's another edge where we are working, to work at that edge of consciousness, where people start realizing that our own mind, our own being is the crucible where these decisions occur, like meaning where, you know, especially collectively speaking, if a lot of people work at the same edge from the same level of consciousness, then there is a particular outcome that can flip into being. But if like a large number of people choose another level of consciousness or choose not to evolve and stay on a, well, again, you get a hierarchy of old and new, and that gets really tricky. So it's really hard to find words for it. But let me put it this way. I believe there are like dominant ways of consciousness that are, we currently see that in operation all over the earth. Now, unless we actively work on shifting that, we will be creating more of the same. So we just need to look at the earth and what's going on the earth. Do we want more of the same, or do we want to claim our collective power of co-creating, of co-manifesting something else? Now, if you're in the camp that says, no, actually for whatever, my children's children, for the children of humanity, I want something different, then actually the edge where we need to work, we need to do inner activism. We need to use ourselves as the crucible. And that then also means that rather than complaining, you know, as we all do as human beings, sometimes, oh, we live in such difficult times, or, oh, this is so difficult and restrictive. It's more to sort of say, no, actually, we're living at crucial times. Like we live at a time where we get to be that crucible, where something is actively being birthed, and we get to make a contribution to that. And to me, that's an astounding privilege, no matter what restrictions or challenges are in operation in my personal life, and they certainly exist. But I also wake up every morning and think, oh, the privilege to be alive at this time where such big outcomes are teetering on the brink of coming into manifestation, and it could go either way.
Yeah, I really, really hear that. And that's something, the grounding of the ancestors is so powerful for remembering that, because of course, with that awareness comes responsibility, doesn't it?
Yes.
When we are aware that we are, how we think, feel, act, essentially what vibration we choose to be a living experience of in the world is going to determine the vibration of the world, then that holds responsibility, and it can feel so incredibly daunting. I think that I was having an interesting conversation recently with a friend, and I was talking about the energy of hope, and he said, oh, you know, when I think of hope, I think of the old adage, hope is a beggar. And I really felt the flash of grief that this amazing energy of hope, active hope, has been manipulated or crushed into simply being something that isn't worth having. I really felt that, and I think so much, there's so much fear moving through humanity at the moment, so much lack of a feeling of disempowerment, You know, who am I to make any kind of change in this world? How can I? And they're such deep questions to grapple with. That place, I'm reminded of, well, I think two things. For me, that the grounding of the ancestors in that situation. And there was a time, one of the runes that came forward, I'm remembering really clearly. I don't think I've remembered this before. But the Ing rune came in, and it came up out of the ground. As soon as it moved out of the circle, it kind of surrounded the entire bed as I was lying in it. So the Ing rune, for those who don't know it, is like a diamond, essentially. And it came, and as it came down and up from the earth and the heavens, it sort of put me in a chamber. And that chamber gave a sight to the ancestors. And just at first there was, you know, quite a few people in the room, and then the whole room was full, and then the plain, the immense field full of ancestors of all, and I'm not talking, of course, my personal ancestors necessarily, yes, and the ancestral realm was there. And that place of support, the push, I think, that each of us can feel in our blood, in our bones, to actually make a difference. Like, that's inspiring. Every day I work with that ancestral energy, either to just relax into it, to say, oh, today I'm not feeling very brave. I'm not feeling like I can nurture that active hope today. Today, actually, it feels like, oh my goodness, the world is screwed. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are we going to, this breaking point that we're in, how do we help it break in the most beautiful and bountiful way for the entire cosmos moving forward? And it feels at those times like actually the ancestors can embrace and hold. And I hear the whispers almost, we've been through this before. It's okay. We know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And at other times, of course, there's that sort of, in my experience of the ancestral field, there can be the fire or the passion moving forward, the drive, the volitional will of that ancestral wisdom. It's not so much there, Prune, like, be brave today, but it's a kind of kick up the bum to say, come on, now's the time to really shine that way forward for yourself. Help other people shine that way forward for them. So that place of hope, really, really takes courage, takes big courage, I think, right now.
Courage. And words such as hope, optimism, and idealism shouldn't be dirty words. We should always reclaim them and dust them off. You know, they should be beautiful words.
Yeah.
But I also think that what you're sharing here leads us on to the topic of courageous warriorship. I think you're already there, basically. But I just wanted to, that was a term that came up in a recent conversation between us. So I just wanted to ask you about that also, what you mean by the term courageous warriorship.
Yeah. There's sometimes that term courageous warriorship. So it's a term that I use really to talk just about holding the hope of now, holding that hope of, yes, because I am part of we, then we can. If we think of the I, we, world vibrations, concentric circles moving between those three continually, then to think about helping a new way of being come into the world can feel totally overwhelming. And on those days, and on the days when it feels okay, actually I call on that courageous warriorship, and we all do in our own ways. I remember very clearly waking up one morning a few years ago and just feeling the weight of myself, feeling the burden of me, the grief of the world, all words that I know every single person will be familiar with. And sitting and thinking, yeah, this is a very real theme that we're all working with. So how can I meet that? How personally can I meet that theme? I worked for several years with some of the elders from the Mi'kmaq First Nation, and one of them, particularly Elder Albert Marshall, he would say that every morning he prayed to keep doubt from his mind and fear from his heart.
Wow. Yeah.
And that phrase, like the humility and power that he held, embodied, expressed as he said that, that was really in my mind on that morning. So I'm like, actually, right now, I'm feeling that doubt and I'm feeling that fear, and I can choose to work differently with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I journeyed, I went, and I often walk and journey at the same time. So I was walking and journeying, and I saw the very clear vision of a battlefield. And in some ways, I don't even want to speak this because I don't believe we're in a battle. I don't believe the language of conquest or battle is an appropriate one to think about birthing the new world forward. But at the same time, there is that place of warriorship of the heart. And in this vision, there was the battlefield and there was the community. And there was that question that was inherent between these two places of, to me personally, am I willing to enter the fray? Am I willing to walk into the chaos? Am I willing to actually stand there in my power, my light, my heart desire to see a new world? And the image came of almost like wings or a cloak of armor wrapping itself around me. And it's not armor that's impenetrable, but it was a protective. And that's where that concept of courageous warriorship, from that day forward, it felt on the times when I wake up and I don't feel courageous. I don't feel like, yes, I can shine my light in the world today to make a difference. On the days I feel like, goodness, where is the light? Then I call on that term and I remind myself, one, it's community. There's no way a single heart warrior or courageous warrior can do this, but there are millions of us doing it. And as soon as I drop into that, then I feel braver and I feel like, yeah, we can do it. So that's a phrase that I hold very close inside me.
Yeah, no, I think that is beautiful. I've actually started talking about myself as a fierce and ferocious, furious grandma. I'm not a grandma yet in the sense of I don't have grandchildren. My eldest son is 21, it's a bit early days. But it's more like really, I have a real issue by the way that old age is perceived so negatively and the way that old people are treated and not as the elders they should be. So that's like one of my things at the moment as I grow that little bit older, where I think, I shall go out as an elder and I shall speak for what I believe. And even if I feel the fear, I shall do things anyway, because I feel that's like the only way I can be an elder in this world. And that's what I hope to be. That's what I'm working towards. Not even saying I am one, but that is like my vision. I think that's the highest thing I can think of what I want to do with these years that I hopefully still have ahead of me. So I suppose that's my idea of courageous warriorship. So Prune, I think absolutely. We're getting to the end of this. It's been a pleasure to have a dialogue with you. Is there anything that we have not said or anything you want to ask me, like just to close it? Is there anything that needs to be spoken that hasn't been?
Well, I feel like I want to pick up a little bit on that fierceness. When you're talking about the fierceness, I do feel like, Imelda, there's something for you to say about reclaiming the fierceness of woman. Because the fierceness of man and the fierceness of women are quite different. And the fierceness of man, I feel, has been lauded and praised and held and nurtured in our communities, held as an ideal that actually is unhealthy for men, let alone women.
Yeah, well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I wonder if there's anything you want to say about the fierceness of woman, of a woman of all ages. You know, I have a 18-year-old daughter, and my goodness, I see her fierceness. I see these young men and women standing forward in a way that in our generation, maybe we were less inclined to do. And here you are talking about the fierceness of the elder wisdom as well. So why don't just see if there's anything that wants to come out there?
I think that's a very good question. I think that we are currently living in times where a lot of things we took for granted are being questioned. I think that that is a good process to like think again. You know, there is like woke culture, there's the issue with pronouns, there's the issue with transgender people. So there are lots of things going on there. And I think it's a good thing for all of us to think again, what words do we use? And, you know, how do we even see things and interact with them? But I think there's also a shadow side to that, where there is now a kind of dominant narrative that we're all supposed to play by, and that I will never agree to. What I very much teach and believe is that people all for themselves need to arrive at what their deep inner truth is, and that people need to be given the space to speak that. So for the times that we live in, I think that is the really big thing. Like, no matter what age, if you know we're talking about a young girl or an older woman, or like whatever age, or even a person who identifies as female. But I think that we should give ourselves and others the opportunity to speak what we really believe, and not be pushed into kind of following a dominant narrative, because that's what the zeitgeist dictates. And I'm just observing that it takes an incredible amount of courage for girls, women, ladies, mothers, again, you know, females of any description, any age, any level of self-identification, to actually do that. And then I'm also speaking up for the kind of the everyday courage, not the kind of courage that makes the newspapers and the YouTube channel, but I'm talking about the courage for, you know, say a child standing up in school and speaking a non-popular opinion, or a child coming to the defense of another child that's like at the receiving end of something in school, or a really young person who says, well, no, that's what you're trying to lay on me, but that's not my narrative, and I'm not going to follow that. So for me, that is the kind of the fierceness and the courageous warriorship in everyday interaction. And I see that as a quality that needs more nurturing and encouraging for the times that we live in.
Beautiful. Thanks, Imelda. That's really, seems a beautiful way to end this as well.
Okay. Then making the screen larger, so I'm not looking at the notes. Then I want to thank you very much for finding the time to be here today, Prune. You know, it's always delightful to have a conversation with you. So thank you for being here and sharing your journey. Really hope it will inspire more people to work with the runes also in these challenging times. And I remember when the pandemic started, I was teaching a series of rune classes where we're like making sigils and like, you know, using the runes and sigils as tools for spiritual protection. So kind of like, you know, we have the kind of medical vaccines, but we can also make spiritual vaccines and, you know, work with things on that level. So I really look forward to hearing what you have to share about your journey with the runes. And it's been wonderful to talk. There's one rune magician to another, there's one mother to another, and there's one teacher to another. So I hope that my audience will check out your courses and your work, and we'll put a link for the website in the notes for this session. And then I wish you a very good continuation in good health, and may you be with us for a really long time and do all you do, and all the midwifery you do, and all the teaching you do. Thank you very much, Prune.
Thank you, Imelda, for that beautiful blessing as well.
Okay, thank you. So bye everyone. I will be back in February with another interview, not an interview, dialogue.